Hi Gabe, thanks for sitting down with us.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for asking.
You've been in the movie industry for how long now?
Well, movies, film, film, TV, and theater. My family's predominantly a theater family, you know. But if you're asking me how long I've been in it, since birth.
Since birth.
My mother married my dad. My dad was a very well-known theatrical performer on Broadway. He was one of the Dead End kids, Gabe Dell.
And yeah, you came from a family of well-known actors, right?
I always say I'm a cobbler's son. You know, I came from, my grandfather was Henry Daniell, the great character villain of the golden era of film, with movies like The Great Dictator, Philadelphia Story, The Body Snatcher with Boris Karloff, which is, we're doing this interview around Halloween, so that film is actually around a lot, probably to see it on AMC and stuff like that. Bela Lugosi's in that film also.
Oh, right.
And other films, The Egyptian, and I said The Great Dictator, and Camille with Greta Garbo, who you know, is one of the most famous scenes with Greta Garbo, where he plays the Baron, and he knows that she's having an affair, but he's been supporting her, and they do the great piano scene where he sits there and they know that it's a lie, and she starts laughing, and he goes, ha 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 ha, ha ha ha, he starts going nuts.
Perfecting it.
Oh, well, yeah, he's pissed.
Yeah.
You know, and they say one of the one of the least acclaimed, you know, great actors of his time. He didn't necessarily get his due, but now he's beginning to have a whole new fan base. It's happening on the internet.
Right.
You know.
Why do you think that is?
I think that is because you know, the new generation is really wanting to know where film comes from now. Now there's a resurgence, a need to understand where the history comes from, because as technology changes, we want to go back to the origin of where it started. We become interested again in the history of it. You know, and film is really not something that's going to be used so much anymore. The actual film, you know, silver halide crystals, they're not going to be the way in which we look at motion pictures anymore. We're going to be watching them in zeros and ones in video. And with that comes a nostalgia. You know, where we want to preserve, like what Spielberg is doing, or not Spielberg, but Scorsese. Spielberg's got his hand in it also, but Scorsese's over there at their UCLA library, you know, preserving these great films, my granddad's films, and my dad's films. My dad did Dead End and Angels with Dirty Faces, and They Made Me a Criminal. These are some of the biggest gangster movies of Americana ever. The movies where Humphrey Bogart really kind of made himself known. That's how he became to be who he is. We're doing a big documentary about that now. I've been working on it for about 2 years.
Oh, wow.
And we've been going around to all the great old artists, you know. And we can't, and the other thing, you say, why is it coming around? The other thing is that we have a responsibility to remember our history, you know. And America is it's a young culture. You know, we see the protests that are going on today. We're redefining what the Declaration of Independence really means. I mean, we're really going to say, you know, if this really stands for something, then we have to look at the origin of what the purpose that we set out to do. And each of us, you know, because this country is everyone's country. It's not just one race, it's all races. You know, and there's a unique quality in that. And as filmmakers, you know, then everybody's story is important, isn't it? Every culture's story is important.
Right.
So then I think, again, as more and more people come to America, again, our history, the film history, becomes important. So to answer your question very long-windedly, I would say that the resurgence in Henry Daniell's fame, or what he brought, it's not so much about fame. He was he was what you call a working class actor. You know, he was a character actor, and my father was a character actor, and they worked. They really worked. You know, and but because our country's changing, we're kind of seeing the films being remade again. You know, my grandfather was famous for a movie called The Seahawk with Errol Flynn, which is known for one of the most famous duel scenes, and also one of the most famous soundtracks in film. They use it in film schools all the time to teach about how to do a soundtrack for a film, and that was the film that also that was that modeled the great lightsaber fight in Star Wars with Darth Vader and Obi-Wan.
But speaking of these remakes and these great stories, do you think that the industry has lost character in their stories from just doing remakes and producing what they think people want to see and giving in to no longer listening to the creative voice?
Well, commercialism versus art. Art and commerce have to come together, and they'll always clash in every generation, is what I've seen, and another reason why it's important that we study our history. And film history tells us the history of the human beings and our, you know, how we are evolving, because we get to look at ourselves and see what, you know, what's important to us, and, you know, what we qualify as normative values or you know, mores, you know. But as far as the industry, you know, people will always, if they find something good that makes money or creates commerce, they're going to try to create that and capture, you know, the lightning in a bottle every single, you know, until it stops. So.
And I know you're trying to put art back into movies. I heard you're doing shorts now.
Well, yes. My friend and I, Dal Walton III, and myself, and a group of artists from the Actors Studio, and other artists who, you know, with the technology that's growing right now, we've had this great opportunity to not sit around and wait to get a job, but to create stories and work out stories. And that's one of the reasons I built this house. You know, I bought this house back. It was my father's house. Jack Warner gave my dad the money of Warner Brothers to build this house, and it was built from the ground up. And I bought it back, and I'm trying to get it back from the bank now.
Yeah.
But, you know, and it's all going to work out. We're in a very challenging time, but because the times are so challenging, in these times when artists rise to the occasion and they start telling the new story of humanity, you know, and we can't say, oh, look at what's going on. We have to take our craft, our video cameras, our paintbrushes, our typewriters, our computers, and we have to communicate the story of the human condition as it's being affected by the particular pressure, you know, because we're evolving, and that's what artists do. You know, we're Shakespeare says we're the brief chronicles of our time. You know, in this time we chronicle through video production, through YouTube. It just takes on a different format. You know, so are we losing the essence of what art is in the storytelling process? I don't think so. I think right now we're gaining a deeper insight, and the newer generation is being able to access it more easily, so they're able to tell their stories. You know, teenagers can make films today, and 70-year-old men and women can make films today, and they can put them up on the internet, and they can get seen for what their content is. We're starting to look at ourselves as a society of what's on the inside. We've been looking on the outside for so long. Now we're beginning to look on the inside. It's a great time to be an artist. It's a great time to be a filmmaker.
And as an artist, you also act. That's another format, right?
Right. I've always been an actor. Been an actor for a long time. And
when you started acting, I know you kind of strayed away from your family name, so to speak. Why?
When I started acting, I grew up in a pretty well-known theatrical circle. Not the everyday citizen knows, Gabe Dell, but anybody from the 50s and the 40s, 50s, and 60s does. And my dad was responsible for what is the Tonight Show.
Oh.
But he, with an ensemble group of characters, with Steve Allen, who really was one of the creators of the original Tonight Show, and Louis Nye, Tom Poston, Don Knotts, and the like. These guys were the writers, and then there was the Sid Caesar Show, and these were a handful of comics, that did all their own writing and did live television. Any mistakes, and so I followed that act, and I followed my grandfather's act, but nobody ever knew that I was my grandfather's son because he had a different name, Henry Danielle. But my dad's name is my name, Gabriel Dell. And
but you sort of wanted to pave your own way.
I needed to pave my own way because, first of all, my father said to me, I remember I left school and my dad was very sick, and my father raised me on his own, well, not on his own, but with his sister, my aunt. And my Uncle Jack, who was a African-American tap dancer, one of the original Cotton Club dancers. But that's another story. I'll tell you about that later. They had a mixed marriage for over 60 years throughout all the protests in America. Never understood why everybody was fighting each other, because they were so in love with each other. And one day I'll make that movie. I think it's a beautiful story. Love conquers all. But yeah, I became a member of the Actors Studio when I was 19 years old, and I didn't want anybody to know that I was Gabe Dell's kid, so I went in there and did my own audition and earned my keep on my own. I swept the floors of the studio where Brando and Shelley Winters, and I was the youngest person there at that time, and I had the fortunate opportunity to work with these great American masters. Shelley Winters, who took me in after my father died. I was confused. I didn't know what to do, and she took me in. Gabe, you get over here. You can come over here anytime. And I stayed with her, and she taught me how to read a script. She taught me how to study. She taught me that it was discipline. Acting isn't just getting up and you got to do the work. And I learned how to do the work, and I made a name for myself in that particular circle of artists. Not so much the commercial side of things, because I earned the respect of Marty Landau and Mark Rydell and some of the greats who begged me to go on. But I found that acting to me was always, like I said, I'm a cobbler's son. It was a craft. It wasn't about the fame and the fortune, and not that I'm saying that's a benefit that comes from that. But for me, it was, how good can I be at this craft? How good can I get at doing this? And I found through doing the movies, if you look me up, I've got those horror films, and I've got the 90210 stuff, and I love doing it, but I had a little chip on my shoulder about the way in which you had to achieve it. And it kind of goes to your first question, where the art goes out and the commercialism comes in. We were just creating stuff, and I was always wanting to create stuff that meant something to me. So I looked for anything in the littlest of things to make it mean something to me.
So is that when you decided to take a break from acting and actually teach the craft to your fellow actors?
Yeah, that's when I decided first. I remember my father telling me, and this goes back to the beginning, I remember my father telling me that one day you're going to find yourself there in front of a camera or on the stage, and you might go, I feel like I'm full of shit. And I was there one day, and I was like, I love what I'm doing, but why am I doing what I'm doing? And probably the only time I really listened to my dad. He said, if you do that, kid, you need to go and learn another art. And in that other art, you'll realize what it is that's missing from your own art, or you'll learn the art that you should be doing.